Buys $1.29 and €1.16. LBC weather, some showers in the north and east tonight. A few showers across Wales as well. Clear elsewhere with a chance of frost by dawn, lows of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Zora Suleiman.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8:03 here on LBC. Over the course of the next 5 weeks, we're going to be interviewing major figures from the world of politics during the election campaign, as you might imagine. Every Tuesday and every Thursday, we'll have a single politician in the studio. On Thursday, we'll be talking to the Liberal Democrats' Chuka Umunna. Still seems weird to say that, doesn't it? But today, we're delighted to welcome John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, into the studio again. Welcome, John.
Hi, thanks for inviting me back.
Are you actually looking forward to the next 5 weeks? Or, I mean, you fought a lot of elections over the years. Do you sort of get a sense of excitement?
Yes,
or do you think, oh my God, not again?
I think there must be something wrong with me. I quite like elections.
What do you like about them?
Talking to people. It's great. You get, on the doorstep, it's great. And meetings, that sort of thing. Lots of banter. And actually it is, it is a good way in which you pick up what people are feeling, yeah. And generally people are pretty good natured. They might have strong views, but generally they're pretty civil about how they address them. So no, I like it, actually. It's a strange beast, I do.
And is there a sense that this is the time? I mean, if it doesn't work this time, you've already said that you and Jeremy Corbyn would stand down if you don't win. But I mean,
this is a big one. Yeah. I know we always say that about elections, but I think this one is a big one. I think there's such a different paths that the political parties are taking. So this is quite decisive in terms of how we want the country for the future. The thing about elections as well is that you feel as though you're a player on the field rather than just a spectator. So you actually are engaged in the debate, and you can learn things and you can shift things as well.
And if you win, I mean, do you have any sense of self-doubt, any imposter syndrome at all? Or do you think, oh my God, the responsibility that will be on my shoulders after December the 13th?
If people don't feel that, there's something wrong with them. They really are. You always, whatever job you're in, if it's a job with considerable responsibility, you must feel, anxious about, am I going to get this right? And if anyone who says any different, I think there is something psychologically wrong with them. But remember, I've been around a long while. 45 years in my constituency. I've been engaged in politics. I've been in Parliament 22 years. Before that, a civil servant in local government for a number of years as well. And for this election, I think we're more prepared than ever. Preparation, not just for the election, but also for government as well.
Do you take advice well?
I do, actually. Yeah.
When was the last time that you took a piece of advice which changed your mind?
Literally this week. We were looking, in Jeremy's first leadership election, we looked at this issue about right to buy for private tenants, and we've been consulting people. And it's interesting, a large number of people have come along, particularly it's interesting in my constituency in the Asian community, where they've said, actually, look, we do have another property and we've let it out. And often it'll be for our family or it'll be our pension or whatever. So therefore they felt disadvantaged by that. And I said, yeah, OK, we'll drop it. I understand that completely.
OK, we might come back to that a little bit later. Well, there's lots of subjects I want to cover over the course of the next hour. By the way, if you want to watch us at the moment, you can do so on the LBC website, YouTube channel, Facebook page and Twitter. But I want to start off with these comments from Jacob Rees-Mogg when he was talking to Nick Ferrari on LBC this morning. Let me just play you the comments.
It seems to me that is the tragedy of it, that the more one's read over the weekend about the report and about the chances of people surviving, if you just ignore what you're told and leave, you are so much safer. And I think if either of us were in a fire, whatever the fire brigade said, we would leave the burning building. It just seems the common sense thing to do, and it is such a tragedy that didn't happen.
What are your views on that? There have been calls for him to resign today.
I'm pretty angry about it. I've met many of the Grenfell survivors. I've been on the silent walk that they have once a month. I've met them in the House of Commons. I've met them in the community. It's crass, absolutely crass, insensitive. and pretty brutal. But it's not just Jacob Rees-Mogg. Andrew Bridgen has followed up those remarks this evening, and used the way it was interpreted by the interviewer. He was basically saying that Jacob Rees-Mogg would have survived because he was cleverer. This is just so insensitive. We've got people who've lost family members. Jacob Rees-Mogg's apologised. I haven't heard any apology from Andrew Bridgen yet, but it's brutal, and it betrays something really deeply insensitive and crass. And I can understand why the Grenfell people are so upset. I really can.
He has apologised. Should that be the end of it, or would you endorse calls for him to resign?
I think he needs to think about himself. I think he needs to think about whether he judges apologies enough. It's too much of a tragedy to even go over. But when you meet the people who've lost lives, and they did everything asked of them, they did follow the advice of the fire brigade. It's not acceptable, I'm afraid.
I don't know if you follow Stormzy on Twitter, but he's been commenting on Jacob Rees-Mogg using some quite violent language, which I'm not sure is helpful to anybody. Do you think that this campaign that we're about to enter into, I just had an invitation to speak at a conference put on by a very reputable organisation, all about, is this going to be the nastiest election that we've ever seen? Do you fear that that's the case? And do you think that people like Stormzy just need to tone it down a little bit?
I have a lot of time for Stormzy. I've seen some of the work that he's done, sponsored students at university and things like that, and he actually is socially engaged. But I think, I haven't seen all that he's said, but I should think he's pretty angry as well. I think we all are. We all are. If you're a Londoner and you went through that period and you've met some of the Grenfell people and you've seen their human suffering, yes, we are angry. And if he's expressed anger with language that may not be appropriate for some people, he's expressing a real gut reaction. And then, look, for Jacob Rees-Mogg to say it was bad enough, then for Bridgen then to come on as well and reinforce it, it is unacceptable. Don't they understand how much suffering these people have gone through?
Another thing I want to get onto before we get onto sort of real election policies is the fact that Boris Johnson has been forced to drop his plans to use official Treasury costings of Labour's key policies after an intervention by the Cabinet Secretary. Now, it has been the case in previous governments that they have got the Treasury civil servants to cost the opposition's policies. Why is it different this time?
What normally happens is that I understand way back in 2014 or 13 or 14, Ed Balls and Ed Miliband signed up to a convention which would enable civil servants to cost policies. But that wasn't during the election period. That was between governments. That was between elections. And what would normally happen is the civil servants would liaise with the opposition party, identify clearly what the policy was, and then they'd undertake costings. But what broke the convention this time is that they were going to produce costings without even knowing what our policies were. Our manifesto hasn't even been published yet, and they weren't liaising with us to check whether or not what they were examining was what we actually put forward. And to do it literally within hours of an election being called is just profoundly unacceptable. It breaks all the conventions. And the civil servants were clearly being brought in to play a political role. And once you start politicising the civil service, you undermine the confidence that we have in the civil service. And whatever people think about men from the ministry or whatever, actually we have a pretty good civil service. And their one shining example is that they are independent and they give independent advice.
Let's move on to talk about...
Just on that point though, Ian, let me just take that back a bit. Ages ago, I did say to the government that what all the opposition parties should have is access to the Office of Budget Responsibility so they could submit their policies and get them independently assessed by the OBR. But that was over a year ago, and you don't do that during an election period. You actually do it in advance of that. I was turned down. So this looks like even more of a stunt just on the eve of election. So you can see why the civil servants have blown the whistle. And you can see why I was pretty annoyed when I heard about it too.
So you, as Chancellor, you would let the Conservatives have access?
No, I said that. I said the OBR should be able to examine opposition parties. But also I said to that actually opposition parties would have access to the Treasury model so they can verify their figures as they develop their policies. And that's, in some ways, that would give us better understanding of the range of policies available.
I was stood at the back of the hall during your conference speech in Brighton. And I was thinking to myself, listening to you talk and the policies that you were announcing, that this was the most socialist speech I had ever heard a Labour Shadow Chancellor give. And it went down very well in the hall. How do you describe yourself nowadays? Because you have described yourself as a Marxist in the past. You obviously described yourself as a socialist. You would say that I would say this, wouldn't I? But I was stood there thinking that this is red in claw socialism, something like this country will have never seen before. And the journalist in me thinks, well, I'd love to see this introduced just to cover it. But do you think that it is that, or do you think no, this is just sort of ordinary social democracy?
It's pretty. So I describe myself as a socialist. I think I'm in the tradition of the Attlee government. And some of the policies that if you look at the history of socialism in this country, it goes back a few centuries. So in my speech, I think I made reference to the cooperatives. We're going to double the co-op sector. That goes back to Robert Owen, 3 centuries ago. I think I made reference, yes, to public ownership, and that is the traditional Attlee commitment on public ownership. But actually I said, no, we move beyond that. We want a different type of democratic ownership that we have. I made reference to making sure that people, when they created the wealth, they had a fairer share in that wealth. So shareholders, shareholding, collective shareholding. Again, that goes back to a debate that we've had, Will Hutton, the economist, for the last 20-odd years about the stakeholder economy. So I see I'm in the mainstream of the tradition of British socialism. And that speech, I think, actually laid the foundations of what is taking the ideas that we've developed within our movement into the 21st century. And it is socialist, though. There's no doubt about it. And that socialism is about making sure that the concept of an irreversible shift in wealth and power in favour of working people, that's what it's all about.
But you don't self-identify as a Marxist any longer.
Well, I keep saying I'm almost trying to rehabilitate the reading of Marx in this country.
Well, I know you said that last time we came on, but
it's true.
I think people... in that case, surely if you believe in the basic tenets of Marxism, you shouldn't be ashamed to say, yes, I am a Marxist.
I think that then doesn't portray the breadth of my understanding, because my understanding is that I'm a socialist, and that contains an element of an understanding of Marxist analysis of capitalism, of course, but it also contains that concept of cooperation from Robert Owen, that tradition, also contains that concept of how you create a society which is based upon a wide-ranging culture, so William Morris, and then those other elements of scientific analysis, etc., by the Webbs and others. So that breadth of socialist practice in this country, I celebrate.
I can hear everyone saying, why isn't he asking John McDonnell about Brexit?
Oh, sorry.
I might do. Just a moment. It's 16 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
If you're collecting your prescription, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free prescriptions. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of up to £100. Thankfully, there's a simple way to find out if you should be paying. Search Check Before You Tick online and use our eligibility checker to find out if your benefits mean you can claim for free. Or you can ask your pharmacy team. So always remember to check before you tick. This was brought to you by the NHS.
We live in an age where you can stream any box set instantly. But staying on top of our pensions is anything but instant. PensionBee can transfer most old pensions together into one simple online plan, so you can manage your pension on your smartphone as simply as streaming that box set. Download the app or visit pensionbee.com today.
Authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Capital at risk.
My name's Luke. I live in Dunstable with my wife and 4 daughters. We've got a Ring doorbell too out the front. Every time there's someone who comes up to the door, it notifies my phone, and then I can actually see if there's anyone dodgy at the door. A while ago, we had an incident at the house. My wife and I was in bed about 1:30 in the morning. We got a notification on my Ring app on my phone. So I looked on the actual video itself, and it showed me that he was trying to get underneath the mat to see if there was a key there so we can actually get into the house. The video clip allowed the police to see exactly who is in front of the camera and where that person was touching the door. And that allowed the crime scene technician to dust for prints. Thanks to the video clip and his fingerprints, that was enough to convict him. The most important thing for me is when I'm not here during the night, I need to know that the family's safe, and Ring Doorbell does that.
Join Luke and the millions of people protecting their homes with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Sharing credit card details on scraps of loose paper. Finding battered receipts in the wash. Stressing out your accountant. Expense management doesn't have to be stuck in the dark ages. Say hello to Soldo, company cards that do your expenses for you. Give your team prepaid cards to simply spend, snap the receipt, and that's that. Spend smarter. See the light at soldo.com.
Iain Dale, text 84850. This is LBC.
19 minutes past 8. We have with us John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor. Let's talk about the NHS, because it seems to me in the first few days of the campaign, Labour strategy is to describe Boris Johnson as a liar and to say that the NHS is not safe in Conservative hands. I don't know whether you would agree with that. I hear that every time a Labour politician is interviewed. It's Boris Johnson is a liar and you can't trust the Tories with the NHS.
I think we used the word liar, but we said you can't trust him.
Every time. John Healey, when I was on Any Questions, within the first 5 seconds.
Did he say liar?
Yeah, he did.
Unlike John, but
it is unlike John. But it seems to me the briefing has gone out that those are the two things that every Labour spokesman is supposed to say in any interview.
It just came up. I tell you what, it was there anyway because we were worried about what Johnson would do in his relationship with Trump and the NHS. Then when the Dispatches programme came and those films of the negotiations with the pharmaceutical companies, I think that just put the issues squarely on the agenda.
Well, let's just hear what Donald Trump said in that interview with Nigel Farage when he said the NHS would not be under threat from a post-Brexit trade deal.
He says if we have a trade deal, Donald Trump, it'll be a Trump Brexit and Trump will come and take over our National Health Service. What do you have to say to him?
No, not at all. We wouldn't even be involved in that. No, we're trying to fix our health service. We all have our health service problems, and frankly, and you do over there, and we do. And one of the things that we're running so successfully on is how great a job I've done on healthcare. We've done a fantastic job. No, it's not for us to have anything to do with your healthcare system. No, we're just talking about trade.
But you don't believe the President of the United States?
My level of trust in Donald Trump is about the same level of trust in Boris Johnson. The Dispatches programme saw negotiators sitting down with pharmaceutical companies from the US negotiating. Trump, back in June, made it quite clear the NHS was on the table for the negotiations. We know also some statements that have gone on in terms of US negotiators. Exactly as has been said, it is up for sale under there.
But in that same Dispatches programme, the former General Counsel for the Office of the US Trade Representative, there's a title for you, confirmed that pharmaceuticals would not have to be on the table in trade deals. He said if the UK really is determined to make no changes at all on pharmaceuticals, they can absolutely hold that position. That doesn't have anything to do with us. That's up to y'all.
Yeah, that means Boris Johnson, in his relationship with Donald Trump, will roll over, as far as I'm concerned.
But you've also got organisations, respected organisations like the Centre for European Reform think tank. They've said that public services would be carved out of trade deals. It's not normal to include them. The Centre for Economic Policy Research said it would be very strange for a trade agreement to require a privatisation of a public service.
Some of these bodies are hardly independent. They have their own political agendas. However, it is a matter of trust. It is a matter of trust. And I'm sorry, the combination of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson does not inspire confidence or trust in me and many others that the NHS will be safe. And when it comes down to any trade deals, we know what Trump is about. It's America first. And I think we'll be ripped off.
But surely for a British Prime Minister, it's Britain first. And a British Prime Minister is under no obligation to sign a trade deal that he thinks or she thinks is wrong for the United Kingdom.
Why were the negotiations taking place? Why were the talks taking place with the pharmaceutical companies?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen the programme.
Okay.
But
well,
I mean...
Watch the programme and you'll see that there's been several meetings, discussions with US pharmaceutical companies about their relationship with the NHS. And that means, as far as we're concerned...
But what's wrong with that? Why shouldn't there be? Because presumably a lot of the drugs that we import at the moment are made by US pharmaceutical companies.
Because it is quite clear those negotiations are taking place and the US companies will have one objective, to maximise their profits within the NHS itself. And we believe it's the foot in the door for the private further
extension of privatisation. It could be that the negotiations were all about the pricing of drugs, because obviously we think we're being ripped off by a lot of these companies.
I think it's more than that. I think there's an agenda there. And Trump made it clear. He might have pulled back now, but Trump made it clear in June NHS was on the table.
What do you say to Chris Hobson from NHS Providers, who said that political parties should not use the NHS as a political weapon in election campaigns? He said over-dramatising NHS difficulties or making disingenuous funding claims did the service no favours. That's what you're doing.
No, not at all. Fully agreed with him. Absolutely agreed with him. So therefore what we've done, whatever we've published, they're basically figures published by the House of Commons Library and by the NHS itself. So when we said there's been 80,000 cancellations of operations, that figure came from the NHS via the House of Commons Library. All of the figures that we published on this, all of them have been verified either by the House of Commons Library or by NHS or independent bodies. And therefore, pointing out the facts is not weaponising the NHS. It's actually saying this is the reality of it.
But scaring people that the Conservatives want to privatise the NHS is weaponising the NHS, isn't it? And you know as well as I do that only 7% of the NHS is under private contract.
10 billion has been put out to contract.
7%.
10 billion.
7% of the NHS.
10 billion is a lot of money.
And that was 4% in 1997. It went up to 6% under Tony Blair, and it's gone up to 7% under the Conservatives.
£10 billion worth of contracts going out there.
But what have you got against the private sector being involved in healthcare?
It means basically that some of that money will not just be paying for the service, it will actually also be providing a profit to those companies that will then be paid out in dividends to shareholders. That money should be used solely for the treatment of patients.
What is wrong with the word profit?
When it's public money which should be spent on patients, it shouldn't be spent on profit.
But there's lots of... I mean, would you want to nationalise all of our pharmacies, for example? Well, they provide a very good service. They presumably make a profit.
What we want to do is to make sure services are in-house. So we're not...
Including pharmacy?
Well, I believe actually pharmaceutical provision should be in-house. But at the same time, what we're trying to say to people, we'll manage those contracts when we take over in government. When those contracts run out, we'll protect the patients and we'll bring them in-house that there's public provision.
Even if there is proof that the private sector is doing a really good job?
Well, what will happen is that we'll assess every contract. But the reality is this: when you have a private contractor, you are paying out for that contractor to make a profit, and therefore that money that's paid out in profits is not being spent on patient care.
Well, that may be so, but what if it is more expensive to provide that service within the NHS?
Actually, we believe insourcing is more effective because you can
It might be in some ways, but it might not be in others. Whereas you're saying that you want to bring everything back in.
You're integrating the service into a democratic control overall. You're not wasting resources on profits that will go into private shareholders' pockets. Simple as that. Every penny that we pay for the NHS should be spent on patient care.
So dentistry, for example. I mean, the majority of people see private dentists because the NHS hasn't provided a universal dentistry service for people. Would you want to nationalise all dentist practices?
At the moment, dentistry is organised as it is. A major reorganisation wouldn't prove effective. There are some reforms that we want to undertake to make sure there's better access, but we're talking about the core services of the NHS. And at the moment, £10 billion going out there, quite a significant amount of it going in profits, is a waste of resources.
GP services. I mean, GPs are effectively private sector companies, and they contract their services to the NHS.
Yeah, but they're not private companies. They're not profiteering. They're actually trying to ensure that
some of the salaries that they pay themselves, you might say they are.
The services are provided by NHS.
No, but they are actually they're not run in the same sense that hospitals are run by the NHS. GPs are not.
They're within the NHS.
Let me look at some quotes that I've got here from previous general election campaigns where successive Labour politicians in virtually every election campaign in history have said that Tony Blair, 1997, there are 14 days to save the NHS. You've got here 12 days to save the NHS, 24 hours to save the NHS, 6 months to save our NHS. This is weaponising the NHS.
In 97.
Surely...
hang on, let me defend Tony Blair.
Well, I think we've got our newsline from this interview, John.
Are you sitting comfortably? Let me defend Tony Blair.
The floor is yours. The floor is yours as long as you like.
I tell you, during that... I was a candidate in 97. That's when I got elected. And our NHS was in crisis at the time. We had waiting lists, case after case I was dealing with, of putative constituents who'd been waiting long periods of time for operations, who were in pain and suffering. And as a result of, I think, extensive cuts in the NHS and an element of privatisation, yes, under the Tories, we were in a situation where the NHS was in a deep crisis. After 9 years of a Conservative government, we're back in that crisis again. That's not weaponising the NHS. That's giving an accurate description. I met with doctors, nurses and paramedics on Monday, and we asked them to tell us what it was like on the front line. This was the words of doctors, nurses and paramedics. It is shocking. And they themselves now are saying we could be facing the worst winter crisis that we've seen for years. Now, that's not weaponising the NHS, that's telling it as it is, just repeating the words of those on the front line.
Well, there wasn't much of a defence of Tony Blair there, but
let me say to him, he was right. He was right. That's why...
You heard it here first,
Well, he was right. That's why he increased funding, along with Gordon Brown, into the NHS.
But... do you not think that the Tories have been in power, in control of the NHS for longer than Labour have since it was created? Do you not think that if they were going to privatise it, they might have done it before now?
Well, I think they've rolled out privatisation, £10 billion going out there.
1% extra over the last 10 years?
They're rolling out privatisation on a scale of £10 billion. And it isn't just the privatisation, it's the cutbacks as well. Boris Johnson's hospital, same as mine, Hillingdon Hospital. We've just had to close wards, children's wards, because they're unsafe. We've had windows falling out. We've had buckets placed under the roofs of leaking roofs. We've had theatres not operational. That's the sort of level of neglect, lack of capital investment over the last 9 years. And we've been arguing when it was Jeremy Hunt who was the Secretary of State. We had meeting after meeting with Boris Johnson's predecessor to try and get more money. But it didn't happen.
The Conservatives put in more money to the NHS than you were promising in your 2017 election manifesto, and yet when they announced that money, you again said it wasn't enough, even though you weren't promising as much.
Well, what we said is whatever the Tories are putting in, we'll put on top of that, and we'll reach the limit.
That's no way to run an economy. Just a political party says they'll put in whatever it is, we will put more in.
Wait for it. In 2017, our offer on the NHS far outstripped the Tories. Things have moved on in the last couple of years, and you realise just how much the NHS is in crisis. Even the Tories have had to accept that, and now scrambling
around.
And
they've given Simon Stevens, the chief executive, everything he asked for.
No, they haven't. They have not.
They have. He asked for the extra 20 billion. He got the extra 20 billion. With the greatest respect,
what the health experts are saying is that we have to fund the NHS each year by at least 4%. During the early years of the Tory government, it was just 3.4%. 3.4%, but what they're asking for is above 4% if we're going to have any improvement. What happened in the early 2010s onwards was less than, 1 or 2%. Under Tony Blair, at one point in time, they were putting 6% a year into the NHS to improve it because they inherited, yet again, a crisis from the Tories.
So what are you committing to then?
Well, what we'll do is make sure, whatever the Tories are putting in, we'll make sure that they get what they need.
Well, you must have an idea how much that is.
And you'll see it in our manifesto.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
I can't break the manifesto timetable, can I?
Well, somebody leaked it last time. It worked rather well leaking it, didn't it?
It did, I know. I thought it was quite... Everyone thinks it was a stunt and I got the blame, but it wasn't.
A lot of people got the blame. I think Tom Watson got the blame, but in the end...
it wasn't Tom.
In the end, it actually worked rather well for you. Well,
it did,
see if it does. When's it coming out?
Shortly.
I know that.
Shortly.
Next week?
Shortly. I wouldn't want to spoil
I'm not going to ask you 12 times on that. Right, lots more to talk to John McDonnell about. Stay tuned. It's 8:32. Zora Suleiman has the LBC News headlines.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has apologised unreservedly after comments he made on LBC about the Grenfell Tower fire yesterday. He suggested it would have been the common sense thing to do to ignore the fire service's advice to stay put. Parliament will officially be dissolved at a minute past midnight, meaning the general election campaign gets fully underway underway tomorrow. Today, the Lib Dems have said that cancelling Brexit would boost the economy, while Labour is promising to get the UK's departure from the EU sorted within 6 months. And Boris Johnson says the Conservatives have an oven-ready Brexit deal. And all 79 branches of Mothercare are to close down. 2,500 jobs are now at risk. LBC weather, some showers in the north and east tonight. A few showers across Wales as well. Clear elsewhere with a chance of frost by dawn. Lows of 3 degrees.
LBC.
My name's Luke. I live in Dunstable with my wife and 4 daughters. We've got a Ring doorbell too out the front. Every time there's someone who comes up to the door, it notifies my phone, and then I can actually see if there's anyone dodgy at the door. A while ago, we had an incident at the house. My wife and I was in bed about 1:30 in the morning. We got a notification on my Ring app on my phone. So I looked on the actual video itself, and it showed me that he was trying to get underneath the mat to see if there was a key there so he can actually get into the house. The video clip allowed the police to see exactly who is in front of the camera and where that person was touching the door, and that allowed the crime scene technician to dust for prints. Thanks to the video clip and his fingerprints, that was enough to convict him. The most important thing for me is when I'm not here during the night, I need to know that the family's safe, and Ring Doorbell does that.
Join Luke and the millions of people protecting their homes with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
Hi, it's Lisa and Ryan from Marcham Stores. Have you heard the Lotto jackpot is over £12 million?
And it must be won this Wednesday.
Or thousands of you get a share of the jackpot.
Hey!
Lotto, celebrating 25 years of the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Welcome back, Mr. Jones. How was your Touareg 48-hour test drive? Mr. Jones, I said, how was the test drive?
Fantastic, thank you.
What did you make of the Touareg's touchscreen Innovision cockpit?
Brilliant.
And the climate control massage seats?
Oh, marvellous.
How about the night vision camera?
Absolutely exceptional.
That's great. So, are you going to unlock the door?
No.
The Volkswagen Touareg 48-hour test drive. The hardest part will be giving it back.
Come on, Mr. Jones, open up.
Can't hear you.
Participating retailers only, subject to status, vehicle availability and retailer T&Cs. And 17th of December 2019.
With the worst of winter just around the corner, you don't want to come home to a broken boiler. We're with you. So that's why with British Gas Home Care, we've got your boiler covered 365 days a year. We have thousands of engineers on hand to help get your boiler up and running again. And all from just 46p a day. Get a gift card worth up to £75 when you buy selected home care products online by the 27th of November. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
25 to 9 here on LBC. John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, is with me. John, do you believe that there should be any billionaires in this country?
I don't like the scale of inequality that we've got. And if you look on it at the moment, I think we've got the largest number of billionaires we've ever had before. And at the same time, we've got the highest levels of poverty in some of our communities. So there's something wrong with the society when you've had that range of extremes. And there was a piece of work by Richard Williamson a number of years ago about what happens to a society when those sort of extremes of inequality. And it's quite interesting. It actually identifies increases in levels of violence and crime, antisocial behaviour, lack of engagement, and also mental health issues as well. So I think we do have to address inequality, definitely.
Well, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But when you have Labour MPs like Lloyd Russell-Moyle and indeed your Shadow Treasury colleague Clive Lewis saying, well, the billionaires should be banned, I mean, how would you even do that?
Well, I think if you create a more equal society, you wouldn't have that level of extremes between billionaires and people queuing up at food banks. You wouldn't have that.
But that doesn't really answer the question, does it?
Well, it does, because what you do is ensure you have a society where you haven't got this multitude of billionaires, whilst at the same time you've got, well, what is it, 4.5 million children living in poverty now?
What would you do about that? Because can you really say to somebody, well, you've made your money perfectly legitimately, you may be a great philanthropist as well, but we're actually going to take money off you to make sure that you're not a billionaire?
You have a fair taxation system. At the same time, you distribute the rewards in society more fairly. So that means decent wages and, yes, a shareholding within your particular company. You make sure for those people who are unable to work for a whole range of reasons, there's a proper safety net that will not force them into poverty. So in that way, yes, you can create a more equal society.
Are you going to, in effect, what you must be proposing then is a massive wealth tax on billionaires?
No, at the moment what we're trying to say is, as we said in the last general election, there will be a fairer tax system, and that will include, I think we will stick at the income tax levels in terms of, only the top 5% in society will pay a bit more in income tax. But we will be introducing a reversal of some of the corporation tax cuts. We'll also introduce a financial transaction tax in the city. We've been campaigning for that for quite a while. I'm testing it as well, consulting on it within the city. And we'll tackle tax evasion, tax avoidance. And that will begin the process of narrowing the extremes within our society and making it a more equal society.
Are you not worried, though, that you might frighten quite a few rich people out of the country?
Well, that's why I've been touring around. We talked about this before. People were pulling my leg saying it was the tea offensive because I was having lots of cups of tea in the city with asset managers and others. And it was actually saying, look, here's what we're proposing. These are the range of ideas that we've got. And also, as we raise this money, this is what we want to spend it on. And a lot of it was about investment, but also it was about getting our public services to a level which provided decent services and create a decent environment and quality of life for everyone. And actually, I know there's been headlines about this, but I haven't had that sort of adverse reaction. No matter how wealthy you are, there's not, people don't want to be stepping over homeless people when they come out of their homes or their office. They still want police on the streets to ensure that they're safe. And most people will still want all our children to be properly educated and have a decent education system.
But I think a lot of people wonder if you and some of your colleagues understand why profit actually is a good thing.
I think you can understand why you would want to ensure your company or your financial operation, whatever, is successful. And that involves, in our society at the moment, the creation of profit. But what you don't want to do is have a creation of profit which is at the expense of others being ripped off. So you want a fair operation of the system as well as a fair taxation system.
Who are you as a politician to judge what is a fair profit?
Well, that's why what we're saying is that you're introducing a system of regulation, and we have an element of regulation as it is now, in which enables people not to be exploited, and I think that's fair.
Do you want Chris Williamson to be a Labour candidate at this election?
Chris's case is being considered at the moment, so I don't want to say anything that prejudices that case. I'm not on the National Executive Committee. They're considering it, I believe, over the next couple of days. And they'll have in front of them the various complaints and also, I think, Chris's submissions on that. So we'll await their outcome.
The right answer to that question was no, you don't want him to be a candidate at the next election.
I don't want to prejudice with the hearings that are taking place at the moment.
But what do you say to Jewish people who think, well, that is yet another example of the Labour Party equivocating over somebody who has clearly made remarks that people consider anti-Semitic?
Some consider anti-Semitic, and that's what Chris is challenging at the moment.
Most Jewish people consider anti-Semitic.
Some do, but that's the argument that's taking place at the moment. So he's having a fair hearing, and it will be undertaken fairly and scrupulously.
Why hasn't Jeremy Corbyn sued people who call him anti-Semitic?
Because Jeremy is not the sort of person who resorts to courts.
I can't think of many worse insults to somebody. And if you know that you're not anti-Semitic, why wouldn't you take action against people who call you that?
Often it's my view is that the courts usually aren't the sort of place for that sort of discussion. It is better to try and, by example and by your behaviour, demonstrate to people that's completely wrong.
But he's failed to do that, hasn't he? He's failed to do it to the satisfaction of the Jewish community.
I think he's really working hard to know that. We all are, actually. We're working hard to do that. Clearly, some people are not convinced, but by our actions, I think we will eventually convince them.
These things didn't happen when Ed Miliband was leader. What do you put it down to that Labour members and supporters, and I'm not saying a huge number, but enough to make it an important issue, what do you put it down to that they feel able to say these things under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, which they didn't say under Ed Miliband's?
Well, let's be clear about it. There were incidences of anti-Semitism, in all political parties, but even under Tony Blair as well. I can remember.
I can't remember any.
Well, can't you remember the post? Can't you remember the posters that they trialled against the then Conservative leader, the Conservative leader? The ones looking like Charlotte, can you remember?
That, yeah.
Well, it was me and others protesting about that. That forced them to drop it. And you realise...
But there's nothing on this scale, is there? The number of complaints that have been made, and I accept some of them have proved not to be Labour Party members. I completely accept that.
Let's go through it. All I'm saying is, within our society, there's anti-Semitism. Within the Labour Party, because we reflect society, and the Conservative Party, exactly the same, there will be anti-Semitism. And there's a traditional language and, I think, rather obscene portrayals of Jewish people that have been used right the way across our history, including in recent years, not just under Jeremy Corbyn. What's happened?
Jeremy Corbyn actually endorsed one of them.
That's right, and he apologised and saw, my God, that's exactly.
But he must have known. I mean, you cannot look at that picture and think that is anything other than portraying the stereotypical Jewish businessman.
He completely accepted he made a mistake. But look, that's what happened under Tony Blair, and they didn't realise just what a trope it was, and a number of us actually pointed out that's what happened.
Twice you defended Tony Blair in this interview.
No, I'm not defending it. I'm saying we had to intervene to say this is wrong. But it's happened in other political parties as well. And can I just say to you as well, when Boris Johnson was editor of The Spectator, he's had someone publishing an article when he was editor of The Spectator saying, I'm a soi-disant anti-Semite. What is that about as well? All I'm saying is that wherever it occurs, we've got to deal with it. And in all our political parties, anti-Semitism has been there.
Jews are leaving the Labour Party, not the Tory Party, aren't they? You have to admit that.
That's true.
And a lot of them are considering leaving the country if you get into power. Now, that must be embarrassing.
No, it's saddening. It's not embarrassing, it's saddening. And the message that goes out from me and the party is that Jewish people should have no grounds for taking that decision. It saddens me that anyone is even thinking about it, but we've listened, we've learnt, we've taken the actions required of us. We've brought in, no other party's done this, we've brought in an education programme so that our members recognise the sort of history of anti-Semitism there is in our society.
You say that, but Louise Ellman, long-standing MP, you will know her very well. She quit the Labour Party a few weeks ago, and this is what she said. Jeremy Corbyn's complete and utter failure to root out anti-Semitism in his own party is a total dereliction of duty when it comes to protecting that value of equality. Luciana Berger didn't want to leave the Labour Party. She was driven out of the Labour Party and just, it's just an awful position for a political party to be in, and it's self-inflicted.
Yeah, it is an awful position to be in, but every complaint that Louise and Luciana has raised, we've taken up, we've investigated, and we've taken action. And I'm really saddened that Louise has left the party. I really am, but we're doing everything.
Do you understand why she has?
Of course I do, but I think she's wrong, because everything she's asked us to do, we're doing. And we'll come out of this, and it's been incredibly traumatic for all of us, we'll come out of this, I think, as an example of how you do address these issues within a political party. And I think other political parties need to learn from that, not just about anti-Semitism, but other issues as well.
But you accept it's going to damage you at the election?
Well, it already has damaged us, of course it has. But I'm not... I know this sounds a bit pompous, and I don't mean it. The electoral damage isn't the issue for us. I think that's the most trivial matter here. The issue, it isn't about the electoral damage. It's about our standing in society, but our standing within the Jewish community. Now, we're addressing it. I think we'll overcome it. And as a result of that, we'll be a stronger party. And we'll demonstrate that we can be the anti-racist party that this country needs.
When you appeared on my Edinburgh Fringe show, you made a few headlines that afternoon, if you remember.
Yeah.
You said it would be up to the Scottish Parliament to decide if there should be another independence referendum, which was totally against your official party policy, something many Labour MPs and representatives in Scotland were quick to point out. Now, I thought you had misspoken there initially, but then I came to wonder whether you were doing something deliberate, showing a little bit of ankle to the SNP.
You're so...
Well, no, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt
young,
initially.
So cynical. What I said, it was interesting, they reported a couple of sentences and didn't report the others, because I also said We don't want another referendum. We don't support another referendum. It's a complete waste of time, and we've got enough on our plate. But what I also said is if there's a mandate in Scotland and they come to the UK Parliament, we're not the people to reject that sort of thing. But tell you,
that wasn't your party policy at the time,
no,
was it?
Well, our party policy is very, very clear. We said we'd oppose to a referendum. We don't want one. It's a complete waste of time. We've got enough on our plate. And I've said quite clearly since then, we wouldn't deal with it in the formative years of a Labour government. Anyone who came to us on that, SNP or others, had had to have a clear mandate from their own people.
Which they have. Well, they got it in the last Scottish elections. It looks as if they're going to get over 50 seats in this election.
They'd have to renew that mandate in the Scottish elections themselves. And that's open to doubt.
Oh, so well, that's interesting. So if they got over 50 seats in the general election, you would not regard that as a mandate for another referendum?
No, I don't think it would be a mandate. I think they'd need to go back to the people.
So you would not... I do think this is actually quite revealing, because many people think you won't be able to form a government. If you get a majority, obviously you form a government. Yeah. But, the electoral arithmetic would suggest that maybe that's, shall we say, less than 50-50 possibility, and if you look at the polls. So therefore, if you're planning for maybe a minority government, you're not going to go into coalition with the SNP, clearly. They've made that clear.
No understandings, no pacts, nothing.
No supply and confidence, nothing. No sort of quiet word, oi Nicola, we'll give you a referendum if you vote our way.
No.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. I think we'll have a majority Labour government. If there was a minority one, we'd go into government, a minority government, and implement our manifesto. If other political parties want to vote for those policies, that's great. If they don't, we go back to the people.
And if you get slightly more seats than the Conservative, I remember even only one seat more than the Conservatives, you would regard that as a mandate for a change of Prime Minister?
Of course, yeah. If we're the largest party, of course, yeah.
Even if it's only by one, because constitutionally the Conservatives would be entitled to see if they could form a government, even if they had fewer seats than you.
Look, I think it would be a disgrace if they tried to cling onto power in their fingertips like that. If we're a majority, I think we'll be a majority party government. But if we're the largest party, we should form the government.
We're 50 minutes into this interview, and I'm afraid we haven't mentioned Brexit yet. But we're going to rectify that now. Many people regard the official Labour position on Brexit at the moment as a fudge, and I think a lot of the electorate have difficulty understanding it. Can you clear up for us, if there were another referendum, how would you vote in that referendum?
Okay, let's do a dress rehearsal canvas, shall we? Knock knock.
Who's
Mr.
there?
Dale, I'm from the Labour Party.
Are
Mr.
you?
Dale, yeah.
And I don't even close the door. Because I'm polite like that.
Foot in door. Foot in door. I'm here on behalf of the Labour Party.
Give me 30 seconds.
Would you like us to
explain
talk
your
about
position.
Brexit, Mr. Dale?
Yes, I would. I'd love it.
Our policy is fairly straightforward. We believe, at the end of the day, it should be the people that decide. So what we'll be doing...
We decided in 2016, Mr. McDonnell, you're not getting my vote.
That's 3 years ago, and things have moved on, and now, quite clearly, what we've got to do is try and bring the country back together.
Oh, so you have another referendum,
would
that not be more divisive, Mr. McDonnell?
No, not at all. Well, the way that we do that is make
haven't got my vote.
Make sure there's a sensible option for people to vote. If they want to vote, leave, but also give them the option to vote, remain. And then whatever comes out of that referendum, we'll implement.
But, Mr. McDonnell, your new deal, which you're going to negotiate, that would be Brexit in name only. I want to vote for a proper Brexit. I don't want a deal. Why won't that be on the ballot paper?
Well, let me convince you, Mr. Dale. I think this would be a real Brexit.
This is good fun, isn't it?
It would enable us to have a Brexit which protects jobs and the economy. Mr. Dale, you wouldn't want to lose your vote. You wouldn't want to lose your job or have your living standards undermined. So we're giving you a real Brexit, but you'll also have the opportunity to vote Remain. And that really then will enable the Labour government to implement whatever comes out democratically of that referendum and bring the country back together.
My vote depends on your answer to this question. I want to know from you, as my constituency MP, you're not obviously, but if I was living in Hayes you would be, I want to know from you, in that referendum, what would you vote? Would you vote Remain, or would you vote for the deal that you think is so good that you're recommending it to the electorate?
Right. The Labour Party official position...
I don't want to know that. I know what that is. I want to know what you, as my MP, think.
What I'll do is make sure that whatever deal goes through is a deal that will protect the jobs of the economy as best it can.
And will you vote for it?
As you know, Mr. Dale, as my constituent who's known me for a number of years, we've had lots of conversations on this, I voted to Remain in the last referendum. I still think that's the better offer, but I'll make sure that if you want to leave, you'll have an offer that will protect jobs and the economy.
So you would vote Remain in that referendum against the own deal that your colleagues have negotiated?
I'll make sure that people have a fair choice.
No, I know that.
You
said that. You said that, but I want to know how you would vote. I have a right to know as your constituent how you would vote.
But my personal position is not as important as yours, Mr. Dale.
Well, that is true.
And therefore, I'll put you down as a doubtful or Labour.
Highly doubtful, I think, on that answer. I mean, joking apart, okay, there was a very serious element to that exchange because you're going to have that exchange a lot over the next few weeks.
I am all the time. But what's interesting, though, and I'm not trying to divert you on all this, in terms of salience, Brexit isn't the main thing I'm getting on the doorstep at the moment.
45% of the British public think it's the main issue of this election.
I know that from the polls, but I'm not getting that, Ian. I'm not bullying you. That we're not getting that. And sometimes in my community meetings that I'm doing, I'm having to raise Brexit at the end of it because most people are saying to me, the one I'm getting the most at the moment is lack of police on the ground. We've had a rise of, unfortunately.
So you welcome the 20,000 extra police officers?
Well, the problem is I regret that they cut 21,000 and they've been missing for a number of years. And it'll take us years to recruit the new ones. And we have had violent crime rising in my constituency. We've had stabbings, etc. But also I'm getting the NHS, I'm getting education. I'm getting a lot of issues on the environment too.
Final question on a referendum. Emily Thornberry, Keir Starmer, Tom Watson, both unequivocal, saying they would vote Remain. You've kind of said you would, but you haven't been unequivocal on it. John Trickett, however, says he would vote to leave.
There's a range of views.
How many members of the Shadow Cabinet would vote leave?
I can't tell,
because I suspect Mr Corbyn might.
Well, no, there's a range of views within the party because we reflect society overall, and I think we're the only party that actually does. We're the only one that I think, by reflecting the range of views in the country, can bring the country back together again.
HS2, would you cancel it?
No, I think we're committed now. We need to see it through.
You're always been against HS2, have you not?
No. I was against... I'll tell you what annoyed me is that I was the only MP in the whole country that never knew the route of HS2 when it was going through his constituency, but they now dropped all those routes. But no, I'm in favour of the investment in the rail infrastructure. We need more, and we'll be putting quite a sum of money into our manifesto about Northern Railways in particular.
Do you agree with me that...
There you are, let's slip the manifesto now, but we're on.
I missed that. What did you say again? I was thinking about my next question. You've been accused of leading a silent coup against Jeremy Corbyn and that you are the Labour leader in all but name. You've apparently, according to reports, put yourself in daily charge of the Labour election operation. You have removed people from the leader's office. You are basically the leader of the Labour Party, aren't you?
There's a hardy perennial that comes out every autumn, usually, around about this time, where I'm 1 year, in the same week, I was leading a coup against Jeremy Corbyn. At the same time, I was holding him hostage, not allowing him to resign. This is balmy. Jeremy and I are a partnership. We work closely together, have done for 40 years. In terms of the election campaign, Jeremy asked me to do what I did in the last election, and for his leadership elections, is chair the election coordinating committee alongside Ian Lavery and Andrew Gwynn, and that's what I do. So the organisation is straightforward. We meet 7:30 every morning, plan the day, report.
Who's in that meeting?
Ian Lavery, Andrew Gwynn, myself, and a range of the individual officials, so who's doing social media and all the rest of it. And Jeremy is either there or phones in, but we have twice a week we have strategy meetings in the normal way, and I think it's incredibly successful so far.
What's the deal with Tom Watson? He's been very quiet recently, which is unlike him.
No, he isn't. On Monday he did the thing about maintaining the pensioners' access to the BBC.
Anything to do with the Carl Beach controversy? Because he's obviously been very much criticised over that.
He has been out there. On Monday, he did the over 75s free licence for the BBC. Got a lot of coverage. He was out there. He's been active in the chamber quite a lot on a number of issues.
In a Labour government, would he be Deputy Prime Minister?
He's Deputy Leader of the party. We've not really had a Deputy Prime Minister up until now. So that will be for Jeremy to decide. We serve at the Prime Minister Corbyn's pleasure.
Okay. two strikes have been announced. South Western Railways, they want to hold 27 days of strikes in December. Funny how rail strikes always occur in December, isn't it? And the CWU, they have announced industrial action, which could affect postal votes in a general election. Do you support both of these strikes?
I know more about the CW one than the rail one, but there's quite a lot of grievances in terms of CWU, and I'm hoping the management will sort themselves out and get around the table. I think they will.
But do you support these two strikes?
Well, yeah, if there's real grievances, though, you need to know how angry people are. Talk to some of the CW members about what
I talked to Dave Ward in this constituency, in the studio.
Yes, the studio, yeah.
I'm getting delirious now.
Yeah. But I think the management need to get down on the shop floor and talk to some CW members. I visit my local Royal Mail, and I tell you, people are pretty fed up, and they just feel as though they're under assault by management continuously.
Well, what do you make of your candidate for Coventry South, Zara Sultana, who wrote on social media, well, she has had to apologise, that she would celebrate the deaths of world leaders, including Tony Blair, and there's various other tweets from a now deleted account. She did it
as a young student and has apologised and realises that was a horrible thing to say, and she's really apologised. But she was a youngster then. We all make mistakes when we're pretty young.
Well, we all do, but if that had been a Tory candidate, you would be demanding their head, wouldn't you?
I think actually you have a recognition that when they're young and they make these sort of mistakes, they apologise and they can move on. You shouldn't allow people to be barred from.
You have to give an answer to this question. I've got two final questions. Boris Johnson or Joe Swinson as Prime Minister, if you had to pick, if your life depended on it?
There's no chance of this. There's no chance of this whatsoever. We're going to have a majority. Look, I've just been canvassing you. You're on the edge of voting Labour. We'll have a Labour government.
OK. Well, this is a question that I'm hoping for an answer on.
Go on.
It's sent in by a listener. Which has the better chance of happening? A Labour overall majority in the December election, or Liverpool to win the Premier League this season?
Both.
No, you have to choose one.
Both.
Choose one.
Oh, you can't do this to me.
It's Liverpool, isn't it? Go on, admit it. It's Liverpool.
Both. It's going to be both. Jurgen Klopp.
No, this listener says he can't say they have an equal chance, so don't let him off the hook, Mr. Dale.
No, making that up.
No, I'm not.
You are. Come on, show
me. Here.
Okay, all right.
Go on.
Labour government.
Okay.
I'll never be allowed on.
So little confidence in Jurgen Klopp.
Well, actually, I always get I get nervous about Liverpool games. It's not good for my heart the way they've been playing at the moment, last-minute goals and all the rest.
Now, we would love to have you back later in the campaign to take some calls from our listeners if you'd like to do that. No, you've been in since then.
The election I said I would, and I will this time.
Excellent, marvellous. We look forward to that. John McDonnell, thank you very much indeed. Coming up in the next hour, we'll take your calls and get your reaction to what John McDonnell has been saying over the last hour. The lines are open now, 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio.